If you've been sitting here for the last 2 weeks wanting to know where the Jesus was, here he comes. But it's not without a road. If New York was the city that never slept, that met the boy that never would, then Austin, Texas was where everything changed. On this episode of Carrying My Cross podcast, I conclude my story by talking about my move to Austin, Texas, the mistakes I made when coming here, and then, of course, how Jesus met me where I was at and put a final bow on the person that he is creating me to be. We got a lot to go through, so let's jump right into it here on episode 4 of Carrying My Cross podcast.
If you could look out at these lush Texas vineyards through Italian arches, if there were a way to see these rugged Texas mountains from an Australian train, if this Texas forest could be seen from Germany's Autobahn, then you'd know why we say Texas is like a whole other country.
Very pretty out here.
So last time we discussed, I was living in New York. I was working for a fashion company. I was dating my to-be wife, then girlfriend, and things were going pretty good. Other than the fact that New York City is extremely expensive, and I was slowly but surely kind of running out of money, and a drinking problem doesn't help with that side of the equation. So my wife in, I want to say March or April of 2013. Let me just back up a little bit here. My wife, and I'm keep saying wife because she's now my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time. She says, Bill, I got a job opportunity working in Austin, Texas with my brother's design company. She was still working for Jones, New York. I was working for a different fashion company at the time. And what basically happened was her job was ending. We could see the writing on the wall. They were starting to sell off brands. They were starting to do layoffs. And my wife had been at Jones, New York for about 10 years at that point. So we kind of knew things were ending. So she had been looking for other opportunities. Her brother has a design company here in Austin, Texas. They needed a director of operations. So my wife was considering moving to Austin, which of course is a big upheaval for us. And when she approached me with this, my first thought was, well, I'm going to marry her eventually. Eventually I'm going to marry you. And this apartment here in New York is not sustainable. And my job was primarily at that time a mix of work from home and work in the office. I was in an office, but I could work from home. So my answer was, well, I'm going where you're going. And you know what? Why not start fresh? I'd realized my drinking had gotten to a point where it was a little out of control and I needed a fresh start. I also was considering going back to school. So I was like, maybe I'll go back to school. I was doing a lot of writing. I didn't want my next job to be in the IT world. I wanted to pursue writing as a career. So I'm like, maybe I'll go back to school. So I said, you know what, James, I'm going to go back. Let's go to Austin, Texas. So we made the decision. I let my family know a few days later. That conversation did not go well. Not to bring up old things, because again, that comes more into the family side of things. But it was a very challenging conversation. A lot of mean things were said. We've since talked about it as a family, and we've come to some shaky conclusions on the events that transpired. But it was a really tough, emotional moment for everybody involved, myself and my mom and my brother. A lot of people were upset. My sister, not so much. It was more my brother and my brother and I have a very close connection. We still do. We don't talk as much as I'd like to. That's my fault. I'm just not good at keeping in touch with people. If you know me from the other show, you know it'll sometimes take days before I respond. I promise I'm trying to get better at it. I really am. I really am trying to be more focused on others, but that's a different story. So we decide to move we get all ready to move. We moved to Austin in August of 2013, and we settled down in Austin, Texas. And I thought for sure, you know what? Fresh start, new city, 1,700 miles away from New York City. No, we don't know anybody other than she has some family out there, and that's about it. This will be a great place for me to start over. Maybe put the drinking under control a little bit. Maybe rein some things in. My friends in New York all said, and that's why the title of this episode is what it is. They said, when you move to Texas, 3 things are going to happen. You're going to get yourself some giant boots, a big old belt buckle, and become a Jesus freak. And one of those 3 things happened. I think I do own cowboy boots, but I've never worn them. I find them highly uncomfortable. I don't know why anyone wears them. They're very uncomfortable. I do not own a giant belt buckle, but I did become a Jesus freak. So 33%, not bad odds for my friends in New York who predicted at least a third of what my life was going to be. So moved to Austin, Texas. But as anybody who's ever struggled with any dependencies or any addictions knows, your addictions don't just stay behind. They follow you no matter where you are. And when we moved to Austin, my wife started working for the company, her brother's design company. I still worked for the company that I was working for in New York. I just worked remotely. They allowed me. They said, yeah, you can work remotely from Austin. That's fine. So I worked for them for a year. And what was interesting about Austin is I really quickly fell in love with the city. Austin in 2013 is very different than it is now, but it was an easy city to root for. I love live music, and of course, Austin is the live music capital of the world. So there's all sorts of great music. There's great culture, great food, great bars, great nightlife. I mean, for me, it was great. So I kind of picked up where I left off in kind of just doing my own thing. I spent a lot of time out on my own, exploring the bar scene in downtown Austin. I kind of just picked up where I left off and tried to rebuild my New York life in Austin, Texas. And it felt like, as I'm looking back on it now, it really felt like that's what I was attempting to do. I was attempting to cement an old me onto a new place. And for a while, it kind of sort of worked. I started writing for a website here in Austin called The Austinaut, which it still exists, but it's a shell of what it was. A hyperlocal things to do, see, eat, drink in Austin type of blog. I was not working for them for payment, but I would get paid in cool things to do. So I would go to South by Southwest every year. I'd go to ACL Fest to cover music. I go to brewery openings and restaurant openings and all sorts of fun, kind of pre-influencer culture. Although I wrote for them for about 8 years, so I got to see influencer culture kind of grow as I was going to some of these media events and doing coverage and doing that sort of thing. So I was getting my artistic side of me fed. I was getting the creation part of me fed, the creator part. I was writing 2 articles a month, and I was also contributing extra articles for shows. I did weekly show picks in town, and so I did a lot of writing for the Austinaut over those years. But still, through all this, no real Jesus until Grandma Zelma. So Grandma Zelma was, at the time, 93 years old, and she is my wife's grandmother. And she was a very devout believer. And every week, my brother-in-law, JR, would take Grandma Zelma to their local church for Sunday service. My brother-in-law started teaching a class at that church. It's the same church I go to now, Grace Covenant Church. It's the same church. I've only really known one church other than my church of growing up, my church of origin, I guess you could say. And my wife and I never went. Like, we didn't go. We weren't really into it. And my JR decided to start teaching a class at the church. So someone had to then bring Grandma Zelma to church. She was 93 years old. She didn't drive. She couldn't even speak. She had a series of strokes and could only communicate with 1 is yes and 2 is no on her fingers. Like, she could only hold up 1 for yes, 2 for no with her fingers. That way she could communicate yes and no. But she went to church. That woman went to church. She would give you this little face pat and point at the car like, hey, this is what we're doing today. So you didn't keep Grandma Zelma away from church is the point. Grandma Zelma went to church. That's what she did. So JR asked my wife, Jamie, to take Grandma Zelma to church just for like 8 weeks. Just so we could teach this class over this semester, and then he would pick it back up. Jamie starts taking Aunt Grandma Zelma to church. She starts hearing some of the sermons, starts getting a little more interested, asks me if I want to go. She's like, Bill, some of this stuff's actually pretty interesting and good. And I'm like, remember from 2 episodes ago? This is my Mario time. Like, no, I'd rather stay home and play Mario Brothers. That is what I want to do. I have no interest in anything else. That's my goal. And over time, my wife started getting more interested. I was not. Fast forward about 6 or so weeks, there was usually a handoff between services where my wife would show up with Grandma Zelma, and I'm going to get this part of it a little wrong. I apologize. And JR would be done with his lesson. But as you know, if you go to church, it's a social thing. You're talking, you're kibitzing, you're chatting. And if you're somebody who's actually teaching at the church, people know you. So there's usually a delay between services where everyone gets together and congregates and talks and fellowships and all that fun stuff. And there was a delay where my wife, let me just back up a little bit. My wife started going to an introduction to faith class. So my wife, getting more interested in Christianity and Jesus and God and the Bible, decided to take an introduction to faith class. So since my wife was taking the introduction to faith class and JR was just getting done with his class, there was sometimes a delay in between services. My wife had to get to her class. JR needed to get to Grandma Zelma so they can kind of hand off for the second service. But one day, the handoff didn't happen in time. And my wife says to Grandma Zelma, please, hey, JR will be here in a second. Just hang out here. I need to go to my class. JR was a little bit late. Again, no one's fault. It's just what church does. You lose track of time. And all of a sudden, Grandma Zelma had an episode at church. She got faint. She got panicked. They had to call an ambulance. It was a really scary situation. She just got overwhelmed and had just an episode. That's the best way I can describe it. So then it was decided that Grandma Zelma cannot be left alone. So while JR was continuing his lessons and Jamie was taking her intro to faith class, guess whose job it became to take Grandma Zelma to church? This guy right here, me. And because I knew Grandma Zelma. You don't tell Grandma Zelma she's not going to church for a couple of weeks. You get the face pat. And she says, go, we're doing this now. So I start taking Grandma Zelma to church so my wife can take her class and JR can continue his lesson. And y'all, if this were a movie, if this were like a Hallmark movie, I would probably say something like, and the suns parted and the light streamed in through the rafters and my face was aglow with the glory of God. Y'all, I hated it. I hated it. We would sit 2 rows from the front and I would just stare up at the teaching pastor, going through his sermons, just thinking, this is nonsense. This is ridiculous. This is grr, 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 grumble, grumble, grumble. I hated it. I had no interest in it because it conflicted with everything I thought I knew about myself, about the world, about society. My church doesn't get very political, but of course there are politically charged topics that get discussed in churches, right? And I just, everything conflicted and I had no interest. All I want to do is go home and play my video game again. That's all I want to do. But the one thing that kept me going was that I realized the people attending this church weren't crazy weirdos. And I say that kind of flippantly, but I always had this feeling that people who were into church needed church. Like there was something missing in their lives that church would fill in. For me, I didn't need that. I didn't need something else to fill in my life. I had music and games and writing and all the other things that I was doing on a weekly basis. I didn't need that. But for people who needed that, if religion makes you a better person, cool, great, that's awesome. I'm glad. Be a better person. Be a kinder person. Be a more giving person. Be better. And if church is the vehicle that helps you be a better person, sweet. All for it, but not for me. But I realized that church is that they weren't weirdos. And a lot of these people were kind of just like me. I saw, people of all different ages and all different backgrounds and all different life stages, and realized these people are just people. They're not fanatics. They're not wearing weird robes. They're not doing incantations. They're just going to church. They just believe something I don't. And that's fine. So the one sermon, though, the first sermon that really got its hooks in me, that made me stop grumbling and go, was a series on Ecclesiastes. And one of my dearest friends loves this. He always says, he's like, really? Ecclesiastes is the sermon that got you into it? It wasn't like the Gospels. It wasn't John. It wasn't like a proverb or a psalm. No, it was meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. That's what got you, Mr. Sad Panda Bill. Yes, that's what happened. So it was Ecclesiastes, and it was part of Ecclesiastes. I think it's Ecclesiastes 3, where Solomon is talking about how this world was designed for us to enjoy. Like, God created a world for us to enjoy, but we screwed it up through sin. Like, we messed it up. We are the creators of our own chaos a lot of times. But that was the first thing I heard from the pulpit that was like, okay, I can get behind this. I can get behind the idea that God loves us so much that he created a world for us to enjoy and experience. But there's fences in that sandbox. There's fences to that playground. But we as human beings, we're not content to stay in the playground. We want to go outside the fences. We want to go to the woods. We want to go to the desert. We want to go to the water treatment plant. Like, we want to go to all the different places that are not the sandbox, that are not the playground. And even though everything we need is in the playground, and everything we could want really is in the playground, we want to go outside of it. And that going outside of the fences is sin. And I could get behind this. I could really see myself saying, okay, yeah, I can see that's a God I can get behind, a God that loves us. I grew up with a God of duty, that I had to do things for God. Do your rosary, say your prayers, and then God will love you. Then God will bless you. And it was a warped version of the truth, which God's love doesn't change. Our reactions and responses to that love constantly change. But God is a constant, and that constant of love is evidenced in this world that he created. And I had now evidence, and I had a little bit of theology, and I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. So time moves on. I keep going to church. I keep bringing Grandma Zelma. Jane is done with her sessions, and JR is done with her lessons, but yet we still keep going. I start attending my brother-in-law's men's Bible study, just to get to know my future brother-in-law better. I didn't go there for spiritual guidance. I went there for two reasons. First off, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. It was early, and I am not an early person. But I thought, you know what? I'd like to get to know my brother-in-law better, and clearly this religion thing's important to him. So let me get to know this a little better. That was my reasoning. And secondly, I was writing a lot of short fiction at the time, and thought, you know what? Other viewpoints are really good when building out fiction. When you're building out fiction, other viewpoints are really important. It's good to have different experiences because it makes your characters more fleshed out. And I just thought it might be good for a story or two. Maybe I'll get a story out of it. Why not? So I go to this men's Bible study, and I ask hard questions, and I got really hard but honest answers. And slowly but surely, I'm learning more. And God is now worming his way in, and I'm learning more. And I'm listening to the sermons more. And I actually get myself a Bible, and I crack it open, and I read the first few paragraphs of Genesis, and then I put it away for 6 months because I'm like, what about dinosaurs? What do you mean? What do you mean the Earth's only 6,000 years old? What about dinosaurs? And we'll cover a lot of those different things as this show continues on when it's a little more natural. But slowly but surely, over the course of a year, I'm getting more not into it. And I'm not getting into it in a way that I would get into a band or I get into a piece of fiction or a game or a movie. It was getting into me. It was worming its way in. These little pieces of me that were still empty, that were still angry, that were still full. It was starting to just penetrate. It was starting to soak in as opposed to me just becoming a fan of it. And over the course of a year, I just slowly but surely, until my wife and I, again, we were still dating. We were not married yet. My wife and I proposed to Jamie in December of 2014. And we were set to be married in July of 2015. Quick turnaround. We wanted Grandma Zelma to be there, and we wanted my wife's mom to be there. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. So we want to make sure she was there as well. And so it was a quick turnaround time for the wedding. And we wanted someone from Grace Covenant Church, our church, to marry us. And that was really more of a request from my wife's mom. She's like, can you please have somebody marry you? Don't get like the Universalist pastor friend who got his certification from an online course to marry you. Could you just get like a real pastory person to do it? So we agreed. So we go to Grace and we go to our church and we say, hey, we'd like someone from Grace to marry us. And the way the process works in our church is you have to go through a premarital mentoring session with a mentor couple before you get married. And that's kind of part of it. They do that regardless if you're believers or not, which is interesting. You have to be equally yoked. That's a Bible verse. So what it means to be equally yoked is both people have to have the same beliefs about faith, whether it's positive or negative. It has to be the same, because if you have one person who's a Christian and one person who's not, you're now pulling in two different directions. The Bible says that doesn't work for a married couple. Like, you got to be pulling spiritually in the same direction, or else your Oregon Trail goes off the rails and all of a sudden everyone gets dysentery and dies. That's the last thing you want. So obviously a throwback joke to my days of retro gaming. But so what I did, so we went to the marriage minister, who also happened to be the same person who ran the Bible study for men's. And when he asked us if we were equally yoked, we both went, we're not really believers. We kind of believe, but we don't believe. We're on the fence. We're still learning. And this is Pastor John Patterson. He was the, I think, family life pastor at the time. He was in charge of marriage ministries. And he knew me through the men's Bible study. And he knew my wife through JR, who's prominent in the church and also a close friend of his. So he knew both of us personally. And he just said, hey, listen, if you guys feel led to, I'd love to lead you through surrendering to Jesus right here in the office. And it wasn't a condition of, hey, in order for us to marry you, you must be Christians. You must say the sinner's prayer and believe the belief. You have to do it. It wasn't that. It was an invitation. And I really think that if we had said, no, we're really not ready yet, but we'd still like to move forward marriage ministry, they probably would have let us do it because we were both equally yoked. But we just did it there together in his office. He led me through a prayer. He led my wife through a prayer. We surrendered ourselves to Jesus. And y'all, it's my life's work to describe things. On my resume, it says expert explainer, because that's the best way I can describe my overarching skill set. I'm good at explaining things. I don't know why, I just am. And I cannot accurately explain to you the heart change that happened in that moment. The best way I can do is that it's as if someone took a dirty air filter out of the bowels of my heart and then put a brand new one in. Like, literally replaced it with something clean and fresh. I felt like something entered me. I felt like white healing wind and light entered my heart and restored me. I felt as though I was literally born again, crying, sobbing. I mean, it was extremely emotional, but that moment, nobody on this planet can tell me that moment wasn't from God. It wasn't groupthink. It wasn't a condition of being married by the church. Because if he had done that, if he had said, you must be believers, we won't marry you, we wouldn't have signed up. There's no way. We would have been like, all right, well, I guess we're not going to get married by this church. Cool. Let's go reach out to a friend and see if somebody has a certificate that can just sign the paper. We wouldn't have done it. There's no way. But the invitation to accept the free gift of salvation was exactly that. And I've never felt that before. I've never, and again, you cannot convince me it wasn't a groupthink. It wasn't an altar call. It wasn't a televangelist hitting my head and me falling down and doing convulsions. It wasn't speaking in tongues. It was just an invitation to a family that had a spot for me, that wanted me. I realized at that moment, God doesn't need me. He doesn't need you, but he wants us. He wants me. He wants you. He desires us. Christianity is the only faith practice, religion, etc., where the more you reach out for God, the more he reaches out to you. It's the picture of the cross. It's the cross. The horizontal cross beams are two sides going together. God is pursuing you. He's leaping after you. And we spend a lot of time ignoring him. I spend a lot of time ignoring him. And that's the beautiful thing about faith. No other religion, nothing else has a God that reaches out to you just as much as you reach out to him. It doesn't happen. And again, I wish I could say I was now a perfect person. That's the end of the episode, really quick. Oh, wow, half an hour, done and done. That's not the way life works. That's not the way sanctification works. It's a process that I'm still undergoing. But yeah, it was the most transformative moment of my life. My wife and I, we celebrated. We went to one of our favorite bars, and they were having a founder's beer tasting. It was great. And we were changed irrevocably. And my wife too. My wife, we felt God transform us. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It felt like coming home. The hole I had been trying to fill with all the other stuff finally had its correct thing in there. The puzzle piece was now in, where I was trying to smash and crash and bash other non-fitting puzzle pieces into that space. The right one was in. And then God went to work. God put in work. I started recognizing really quickly, other Christians in my orbit, just based on how they spoke. They said the word fellowship. I went, I gotcha. I know what fellowship is. That's a Jesus word. I know. Non-secular people don't say fellowship. That's a weird thing to say, but Christian people do. One of my dearest friends who ran the website that I wrote for, I saw he posted, it was Eric Hyland, and he'll be on this show at some point, telling his story and telling his testimony, and we'll just talk for probably 2 hours. It'll be awesome. I saw him post something on Facebook, King of Kings, I don't know. And I reached out to him. I'm like, hey man, I've been writing for you for a few years now. And I know we've gotten, pretty close. I think I was his lead blogger at the time. And I said, listen, my wife and I just came to faith. I just saw you post this thing on Facebook. If I misinterpreted, I'm sorry. I don't want to assume anything. But if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you some questions. I'm just looking for Christians who are experienced. And if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you some questions as I'm kind of moving forward in faith. And turns out Eric not only was a believer in Jesus, he is a practiced apologist, which means he's a defender of the Bible. He was a teaching pastor for 30 years. He's read the Bible in all 3 languages. He's written curriculum. He is a extraordinary man of faith. I don't know anybody on this planet who has a stronger faith than Eric. Eric does almost nothing without the Holy Spirit's leading and guidance. He's incredible. So if you want to check out him and his story and his stuff, he is currently driving around the world with his family in a Jeep. He's an overlander, and they're currently getting ready, or they might be, as of this recording, in Africa now. They were in South America and other places. You can check out their stuff at hourlesslife.com or Hourless Life. I don't know if they have a .com, but it's Hourless Life is their YouTube channel where they document all of their travels. It's fascinating stuff. If you're into overlanding, they are a required subscribe for sure. Hourless Life. So anyway, so me and him, we start meeting up every week, and we went through a Christology study. Like, who is Jesus? Who is this guy that you surrendered to? And learning what the Bible says about Jesus. I started getting involved with the kids ministry at church. There was an altar, not an altar call, but there was really at the end, the announcements after church. And the pastor was like, hey, we need people for the kids ministry. And I really felt a pull from the Holy Spirit, like, hey, you should sign up to do kids. At the time, my son was 1.5. So I said, you know what? Let me do 3-year-olds. I think 3-year-olds will be a good primer for what to expect when my son is 3. So whoever wrote my name down on the paper wrote 3rd grade, not 3-year. They must have put like GR instead of YR, because they put me in 3rd grade. And I had never met a 3rd grader before. I didn't know what they look like. I don't know what they smell like. I don't know what to do. What do I do with a 3rd grader? Like, it was bizarre to me. And I started doing every other week with these 3rd graders. And sure enough, at my church, at least, they allow you to move up every year with your grade if you want to. And that's what I did. And I fell into it really hard. Once I hit 4th grade, I was like, ooh, I love this ministry. And I've been with those guys since 3rd grade. They are now seniors in high school. So I've been with them for 8 years. And they're graduating this year from high school. And so now they're in youth group. Obviously, it's not kids. I've been on mission trips with them in Thailand. I now go to every camp, retreat, mission trip. If there's a youth event, I'm probably there. I love youth ministry. It's the reason I love it so much. And I've thought about this recently because as my guys are graduating, the question is, well, what are you going to do, Bill? And my plan is to go right back in with another group. I love youth ministry because I think back to who I was when I was in high school. And I think back to the pressures, which is nothing compared to the pressures these students have. Nothing compared to what they deal with as far as schoolwork and football and band and all the stuff they deal with. It's social media. Forget it. Oh, can't imagine being a teenager in a social media world. That sounds insane to me. I think back to when my dad passed, and I think if I had a youth group, a church community at that age, when that happened, my life would have gone in a completely different direction. If I had a community, and so I think equipping students for a world that is borderline hostile to their faith, and helping them figure out why they go to church and why they believe, and encouraging them to ask questions and be active in their faith, and also share stories of the dumb things I've done, not in, hey, don't do this because Mr. Bill did it, but more of an example like, hey, I've lived a lifetime away from God. I lived 20 years away from him. I know what it's like to live in the world without any faith background. It's hard, and living as a Christian has its own set of hards, but I'll take the Christian set of hards more than stuff that I did as a younger person, as a 20-something and a 30-something living apart from God. I will take the Jesus hards every single time. I think I just love it. I think it's just, there's such a great opportunity to set these students up for continued success so that when they become adults, if they're relying on God for all of their major decisions, and if they're staying in the Word and reading their Bibles and just staying connected with a church community, if I can be a part of that, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. And I don't know if I'm going to do youth ministry forever. I'm already almost getting too old for it. I'm in my mid-40s, and these students run circles around me. But I'll surprise them once in a while. I'll get down there and do some line dances. I'll get down. I'm also genuinely interested in the stuff they do, too. I love hearing about what band they're in or what sport they're doing or what project they're into. I find it genuinely interesting. I just enjoy being around students. And I've always said it, if I've blessed them a fraction of the way they've blessed me over these last 8 years, it's all God, 1,000%. I got involved with Celebrate Recovery at my church. I still do Celebrate Recovery occasionally. I'm kind of like stepped away from it in favor of other ministries. The one thing I will say, though, is when I became a Christian, my alcohol abuse did not just disappear. I was a hard drinking Christian for a number of years. I was still writing about the Austin beer scene. I was still writing about the bar scene. I was still their beer blogger for their website, for the Austinaut. And I would go to every brewery opening. And my wife and I, we did some home brewing on our own. We aged beers. We had a fridge just for our beer collection. Alcohol was a huge part of our life. Huge. And on the surface, it just is like, oh, they're really into spirits. They're really into spirits and drinking. That's what they're into. And I've made so many dumb choices in Austin because unlike New York, where I could just get on a subway or get in a cab and make my way to my apartment when I was hammered, now I was driving for the first time in 4 years. And I've driven drunk more times than I can count. There's some shame there when I talk about my drinking. I've shown up to Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step program for all sorts of hurts, habits, and hangups, not just alcohol, not just booze, not just drugs or sex or anything. It's a 12-step program. That's a Christ-centered 12-step program. I've shown up to CR with a number of beers in my head. I've shown up to kids on Sunday well hungover and not feeling like I could lift my head higher than my chin. My alcoholism did not just disappear until finally, after a number of attempts to get sober and then going back to it, attempts getting back. It was May 31st, 2020. It was right at the height of the pandemic. I decided after 6 months of sobriety to start drinking again, but I set my limits. I'm not drinking during the week, 1 or 2 on the weekends, and that all went away. And I was just sitting, watching Twitch, just drinking beer after beer after beer. And I'm drinking high octane stuff. I'm drinking like barrel-aged stouts, 12%, 13%, Belgians. Like, I'm not drinking Bud Lights. I'm drinking high percentage, high alcohol beers. And it was about 2 a.m. and my stomach was killing me. And I don't know if it was the booze or anything else, but I went into the living room because I didn't want to wake my wife up with my writhing, and my stomach was just stabbing pain. And I look up at the ceiling and I say, God, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? Do you want me to quit drinking? If you want me to quit drinking, God, I'll stop right now. All you need to do, God, is make this pain stop. If you can make this pain in my stomach go away, I'll quit drinking right now. And the pain didn't stop. All right. Again, it's not a Hallmark movie. This is not Christmas time. This is not like, again, but the pain dulled. It dulled just enough for me to realize, oh, I think I just made a promise to God. So the next morning I wake up and I'm feeling much better. And James like, hey, how you feeling? I'm like, oh, I got a little bit of a headache, but I said, I think I have to quit drinking again. And when my wife said, for how long? My answer was, forever. I'm done. And that was it. I haven't touched a drop of alcohol since May 31st, 2020. I credit it to God. I didn't have any crazy. This is why I don't label myself as an alcoholic, because I had no real physical symptoms, but also God could have taken it away. I don't know. I was able to completely be sober. I haven't had a drink since then. I don't plan on having one now. It's been 5 years of sobriety, and I credit God 1,000% with that healing. A big theme you'll also hear as we continue with this podcast series, and as we continue just with me talking, is mental health. I've struggled with mental health issues since I was 8 years old. Again, I think I mentioned it in the first episode. That was my first time I thought about killing myself. I've had a number of aborted suicide attempts in the past. This year, I was in 2025, I was checked into a mental hospital after a serious breakdown. And then I spent 2 months in a recovery center. I alluded to it in the first Screw Tape letters. I spent 2 months between October and November of 2025 in a residential mental health center for crippling depression. And I've struggled with mental illness my entire life. And it's just something that I'm still struggling with. I still have really bad days. A couple days ago, I had a really bad down day. And what God is teaching me through this is he works in his own time frame. You know, I won't wait 5 seconds for a web page to load if it's slow. But so I want everything now. And I feel like God, through this process, through this podcast, and through prayer and staying connected to my Bible, is teaching me that these pieces of me that I've always seen as negatives or problems, he can use for good. And while right now I'm in a season, I'll be perfectly honest, where I am not in the best place. I'm looking for a job for the first time in a decade. I got laid off while I was in the treatment center, and the job search is not going well. I am not finding anything. I'm not even getting an interview. It's been 3 months. It's that whole story. It's been a very challenging year. I'm still getting up every time I get knocked down. And I think that's what God wants. He wants warriors. And God does not promise an easy life. Nowhere in the Bible does it say thou's life shalt be easy. He promises peace regardless of circumstance. He promises joy. He promises contentment. And that's what I'm searching for right now. So that is who I am. That's who you're listening to. You are listening to a recovering alcohol abuser with serious mental health issues who loves youth group and loves serving with students, who reads his Bible sometimes a lot, sometimes not at all, who tries to pray every day, but sometimes fails, sometimes doesn't. You are listening to an imperfect person get in front of a microphone and just try to do this Christian life the way God wants him to do it. And my hope is through this podcast series and through my explorations and through the bits and through all the things I'm going to be doing on this, which is so unclear. This is his show. I guess it's God's show at this point. I don't even know what he has planned for me and what he has in store. I don't know. This is me. And if you're somebody who really wants to listen to a pastor who has everything figured out, this is not it. If you want to listen to somebody who's going to put on a face and be like, everything's great today, this is not it. What you are going to get in this show is honesty. You're going to get the full Christian experience. You're going to get my Christian experience through my lens in the only way I know how to do it, which is just get in front of here, flick the mic on, and hope for the best. But I got to say, if you had asked me 12 years ago if I'd be sitting in front of a microphone doing a Jesus podcast, I'd say you're out of your mind, you're insane, and where are we going drinking later? Because boy, oh boy, it sounds like you need one. All right, I have allergies. My allergies are killing me. My head is starting to hurt, so I'm going to cap it there. Thank you so much for listening to the final part of my testimony. Next week, we'll be back to regular features and regular bits. What's going to happen? I don't know. I'm probably going to do another 316. I think I have another Screw Tape letters queued up. And then I might talk about, I think I'm going to do a thing on New Year's resolutions and just talk. And then maybe in a couple weeks, I may have our first interview ready as well. So Every time you pop onto this show, it could be something completely different, completely random. And I appreciate those of you going with me on this journey, because it's been a journey. And I am grateful for every single one of you who took an hour out of your day to listen to this podcast. You have a lot of options out there. And the fact that you took 45 minutes or half an hour to check out this show is greatly appreciated and never, ever goes unnoticed. The music in this episode was brought to you by Flourish Music. Next week, I'll start with some new bands and introducing some new Christian artists to you as well. And again, just like last week, flourishcreative.org. You can check them out. Great local Austin Christian band / group / collective. Check me out on the socials. TikTok and Instagram are mainly where I hang my virtual hat. And until next time, thank you so much for checking out episode 4 of Carrying My Cross podcast. I'm Bill Tucker, and just have a great, blessed week. See you later, y'all.